for me, where it started, we have family pictures at marches, at April 24th, genocide commemoration marches as kids. You know, my sister's in a stroller, I'm a little kid. I used to be a scout, and they would take us to New York, to Times Square, to the marches there. So as a, you know, that I was maybe 7, 8 when we'd go to New York. So that was always, this activism was part of my family. These same scouts, we would go camping, and we have songs, very patriotic songs that we sing from the Armenian Revolutionary Federation. It's their like youth group and so forth. So the songs are very patriotic and very anti-Turkish. And so, and I thought I would think about these songs afterwards, you know, kind of reflect on, oh, gosh, they made us sing these songs, like, and other than put guns in our hand, because like, it was, you know, it was like, oh, they taught us this hatred.
I believe, like, you know, it was a time, you know, after the Turkish Republic was being established, it was a time to look forward. And I believe, like, you know, quite, I can understand the reasons beyond that, but I really, like, you know, value truth beyond anything. But at the time, they decided to set a barrier to what has happened. They said, like, you know, if we are going to be talking about, you know, or start blaming or, like, you know, taking, you know, responsibility about things, it is going to be a huge list. So let's just set a barrier and go forward, concentrating on the future. So the history, the versions that we read are quite, like, you know, boring, I should say. There are lots of things that has gone on. We were really like heroes and heroines, and, you know, we were great people defending our land, defending our right, and we were victorious. You know, we won at the end. And it is, like, you know, childish, I should say, but I believe it is not quite different in many other countries over the globe. It is pretty similar for many countries, I should say.
So I'm Armenian American. I grew up in central Massachusetts in the first Armenian community, the first Armenian church in the United States. So there was a lot of pride around that. 2 Armenian parents. All the grandparents came from Anatolia, Kharpet, small villages in Kharpet, Dadem and Keserik. And all came here and farmed in the 1920s. The grandmothers were both orphans in France, and so very similar, almost homogeneous story on both sides of my family. You know, so second generation Armenian American, and first generation going to college. So it was all about survival, you know, get educated, and so that's my story.
My own father fought in the First World War, and he switched from the Ottoman army to the Republic Army and fought at 2 fronts during the Independence War. And I have his medal in my Istanbul apartment. So, but he never spoke about it. I mean, it was like, I wish, with my so-called progressive mind, I wish I could talk to him now. But as I was growing up, these were never discussed. What he fought or why he fought, and they were just, he was recruited at the age of 16. So when you hear these stories, these people created a nation out of nothing. So there is that sentiment. I mean, you talk about memory and not forgetting, Turks certainly have their side of many stories.
I grew up in Ohio. My father was an assimilationist and married a non-Armenian. I don't speak anything. Anyway, so I, however, have a sort of a vestige of a real affection for that Armenian family that I saw very rarely as a child. And I heard about the massacres when I was a kid. My grandmother embellished everything and made it sound almost like an adventure. She did not survive. She did not live in Sivas in 1915. She was gone in 1896. She was a young girl when she left Turkey. My grandfather was 19 when he left, but it was in 1909. So, and he was from a much more prosperous family, also from Sivas. They had a big business which had some sort of connection with someplace in Istanbul. And he knew English when he came, and his family lost everything. He lost his parents and in the 1915 events. So I grew up with this knowledge, and I also grew up without much contact with the Armenian community. And at first I didn't pay much attention to it. I just went to college, and then when I was about 30, I began to be interested. When I was in eastern Turkey on that trip with 12 or 11 other Armenians, and once again, that's the only other time in my life when I've been suddenly caught myself realizing that some people have a lot more baggage about this than I do. And I was just loving all the ruins. I didn't care if they were Greek or Hittite, I didn't care. But there was a woman on the trip whose father had been a Dashnak, or he was some sort of revolutionary. She was older than I was, and she'd grown up with his stories of having seen his father murdered with an axe and lying with his head split open. And she was weeping and carrying on a lot of there was a certain part of the trip when we were in the region that her parents had come from, that she was just beside herself.
You know, when I was growing up, history was a big part of my experience, right? Turkish history. Having an historian dad, he was like, taking me into castles, like, old houses, all these things. Like, the land was a big part of it. Like, you can't really feel connected if you're too far away, right? With these people, like, they couldn't be able to have that. So they were talking about it all the time, probably. And beyond that, if you feel something was not right, if you feel that, your dignity were taken away, I guess you would be obsessed too, right?
And as I think about where my family came from, and there is this, like, identity of the Turks, and I want to get beyond the anger and the hatred and get beyond it. However, I do carry that, that legacy, and my communities, Armenian American communities, fight, I guess, for justice. And so I struggle, it's a struggle for me. And internally I struggle to, okay, how can we move forward? As Armenian Americans in the US, how can I help my community move forward?
I'm not saying create an amnesia and forget it, but accept it. I mean, sure, the government is in denial, but as people, we can accept and move forward, but then we have to go beyond our own circle, find ways of how can we do it.
I mean, I try to think, if I knew that my grandparents, rather than having been the victims of this, had been perpetrators of this, oh my God. I don't know what I would do with that knowledge. I would not want to know about it. I'm sure I wouldn't want to know about it. And if I knew that they had been in some way perpetrators and had benefited from that, you know, if they'd gotten somebody's house or something like that, that would be very hard to deal with. Very hard.
Yeah.
So I mean, I really feel like Turks and Armenians both have a very difficult thing back there to face. That we all have it, and I mean that's part of our bond in a way. We all have it. We look at it from different angles, but we all have it.